Hello and welcome to ThePrint. This is Fariha Iftikhar, and today we are joined by Lakshmi Priya Balakrishnan. She is an Indian student at University of Oxford. Lakshmi has been recently allegedly been transferred from PhD program to a master's program without her consent. She has been told that her research on Shakespeare isn't enough for a PhD. Today we are joined by her to discuss more about this case. Thank you so much for joining us, Lakshmi.
Thank you so much for having me on your channel, Fariha, and for giving me a platform to discuss some of the important issues that I've faced at Oxford University. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Lakshmi, first of all, we would like to know about your background a bit. Where are you from? Before joining the University of Oxford, what were you doing in India? Tell us about your study background and your background in general.
I'm from the city of Madurai in Tamil Nadu, and I did my undergraduate and master's courses in the south of India before moving to Delhi to pursue my MPhil in English literature. And after completing my MPhil in English literature, I went on to teach at the University of Delhi in a college where I worked as an assistant professor for 4 years.
Okay.
And during my time there, Shakespeare, and I also went and presented a paper on Shakespeare at the British Council in 2016 when we commemorated Shakespeare's 400th death anniversary. And I received overwhelming feedback from the international audience gathered there. And I decided to then apply for a PhD at Oxford based on that paper. And that's how my journey to Oxford began.
So when did you exactly join Oxford?
Well, I applied for my PhD in January 2017, and I got my offer in March 2017 to join Oxford in October 2017. However, I couldn't take my place that year because I was struggling to find funding for my course, and so I had to defer my place for a year to arrange for funding, which was such a challenging task. And there are two aspects that we need to remember here, which is that funding opportunities are very difficult to come by for PhD courses in the UK. And the second aspect is that as far as humanities courses are concerned, the opportunities for funding are even far fewer. And so that's the circumstances that we are looking into. And I must also add here that the information I received from the university through subject access request shows that I was a highly ranked candidate at Oxford, and I have a strong academic record. I had excellent teachers in India who supported me strongly, and so I had a very strong application. But in spite of this strong application, I didn't get a fund. I didn't get funding because of, yeah, exactly. I didn't get a scholarship because of the circumstances that I referred to. And so as a result, I had to arrange for funding on my own. And I do hail from an underprivileged background. By that, I mean that we don't even own a house to live in India, and we always lived in rented houses. But I did have some land that I sold to come to Oxford, and I also used all the savings from my teaching job. And I pooled in all the resources, but even with all of that, that was not even enough to meet even the first year course at Oxford University. And so it was not possible for me to join Oxford for nearly a year. And only after Tata Trust gave me funding to cover the rest of the first year course was I able to finally emplane to the UK and join Oxford. And for the subsequent years, I funded my course by doing part-time jobs, and I received some support from generous people, and I also raised money on GoFundMe. So this is how I
managed to afford the education there.
Yes, this is how I funded my course, and a lot of sacrifice has gone into it because I left my job in India, which was a well-paying job. And had I not left that, for instance, this year, the colleagues who worked with me have gotten permanent jobs in Delhi University. And so had I not left that, I would have gotten a permanent job, which is very important considering the background I come from. And the other point I would add is I was personally approached by a very a premier institution in India to apply for a fully funded PhD program. They were aware of my PhD research proposal on Shakespeare, and they were extremely keen to have me on board, and that too with a dream supervisor. But I passed on that opportunity because I wanted to come to Oxford because it's this historical place,
Yeah.
And so for I think for many in the UK, Oxford symbolizes elitism and privilege.
Yeah.
But for me, Oxford is synonymous with merit. I thought it was the seat of knowledge. One of my favorite authors in English literature is Virginia Woolf, who was part of the Bloomsbury Group, which was a circle of artists, writers, and intellectuals. In my mind, Oxford's English faculty was akin to the Bloomsbury Group. I imagine Oxford to be a place where we can meet artists, intellectuals, and philosophers. A place that was teeming with Socratic dialogue systems, and a place of learning, of intellectual enrichment and exchange of knowledge. So far from all of these lofty ideals, what I personally witnessed in my field at Oxford, which is the early modern field that's popularly known as the Renaissance field, which is where Shakespeare is studied. So what I witnessed in reality in this field is rampant academic bullying, abuse of power, and petty politics, and narrow-minded and non-inclusive approaches to knowledge. Let me give you a quick example. Most of us in India, and I assume that some in the US as well, prefer a theoretical approach to English literature. But when we come to Oxford, at least I realize that they have a kind of contempt for theoretical approaches because they prefer a historicized approach. And so it's about you complying with their preferred approaches rather than having the academic freedom to explore and pursue literature in the way that you want. And also, as far as the assessment processes are concerned, they're dominated by the assessors' personal, racial, and intellectual biases, as was the case with my PhD confirmation assessment, where they failed me by concocting the arbitrary, biased, and whimsical excuse of Shakespeare supposedly lacking scope for PhD level research. And experts worldwide have testified that my PhD research on Shakespeare is groundbreaking, field-changing, bold, interesting, and impressive. So evidence has emerged for one of the assessors engaging in academic misconduct and plagiarism of my work after she failed me. And this development raises questions about the academic integrity of the PhD assessment outcome. It suggests to me that the assessor failed me in order to sabotage my academic career so that she can appropriate my ideas, which experts have testified to be groundbreaking.
So, Lakshmi, can you explain for our viewers what is the process of assessment there? Like how PhD scholars are assessed, and when do they tell? When do they when they get the information if their research topic is valid enough or it has a scope or not? What is the timeline for that? If you can explain it.
Yeah, sure. So I think that would be a helpful way to proceed with this, because it's important to understand the procedures that are in place at Oxford. So typically when we join as PhD students, we are enrolled as probationary research students.
Okay.
So we have an exam in the first year of our PhD known as transfer of status. And if you look at the guidelines, it clearly says that the purpose of that exam is to evaluate the scope and validity of your research.
Okay.
And so I passed this exam my first attempt in June 2019, whereby my two assessors formally approved the scope and validity of my research project. And after I passed that exam, I went on to record in my online reporting system saying that in an overall sense, the transfer of status process was a positive experience, reaffirming the validity and scope of my project, but at the same time providing constructive criticism for materializing the same. So this is what I recorded after I passed my transfer of status exam. Once we pass this exam, then we have an advanced level internal assessment at Oxford known as the confirmation of status, which happens in the third year. But because I had problems with supervision and there were irregularities in the arrangement of assessors, I had to take 2 attempts at this exam. And my second attempt at confirmation happened in November 2021. I had 2 different assessors who failed me by strangely reasoning in the report that Shakespeare does not have scope for doctoral level studies. And we have to come to the Shakespeare question in a moment, but it must be noted that we have 2 different set of assessors having a very contradictory approach. They are having different emphasis in the evaluation process. And so if you look at the college letter, they have pointed out that any concerns raised by my previous assessors in the first attempt were fully addressed by me. And they also raised concerns about the fact that we have 2 different set of assessors who are raising 2 different set of concerns, which is not a very fair or sustainable approach. And over the past 3 years, I've been submitting appeals and complaints in several stages, both within the university and an external entity known as the Office of the Independent Adjudicator. We abbreviate that as OIA. But I've not been successful in these appeals and complaints processes so far. During the appeals process, I pointed out that scope is procedurally a transfer of status criterion and that I had already passed that exam wherein my previous assessors formally approved the scope and validity of my project. The purpose of confirmation is to evaluate the progress of the research. Instead of focusing on the confirmation criterion of progress, my second confirmation assessors incorrectly obsessed over the scope and validity of my project, which are the criteria of the transfer of status. And so I raised this problem during the appeals process. The Office of the Independent Adjudicator acknowledged this major procedural irregularity, wherein they have said that we do recognize that scope is procedurally a first-year transfer of status criterion and that Lakshmi had already passed that exam, and that the university had previously approved the scope of the project. In spite of admitting that, the OIA did not uphold my appeal, which makes this decision to be fundamentally irrational and unfair. And so that gives you an insight into the appeals processes and how unfair they can be.
So when your assessors said that the Shakespeare's research does not have much scope, what did they exactly mean by that? And were there other students, like white students in particular, who did PhD in the same subject?
Things I explore in Shakespeare are not what the assessors were bothered by. Rather, what they were really bothered by was the fact that my thesis studies Shakespeare, what they refer to in the assessment report as quote-unquote sole focus on Shakespeare. They criticized my thesis' sole focus on Shakespeare and that my exclusion of quote-unquote non-Shakespeare text is quote-unquote better suited in scope for an MLit degree. Now, this is so strange because they are not following their own guidelines. Leaving aside the Shakespeare question, as I pointed out already, scope is procedurally a transfer status criterion, and there's no reason as to why they would create an issue with the problem. This criterion of scope at this advanced stage. There's a related transfer of status assessment criterion which says that assessors are asked to bear in mind that their judgment of the substantial significance of the work should take into account what may reasonably be expected of a capable and diligent student after 3 or at most 4 years of full-time study. So we have to remember that we can't expect all the authors and texts under the sun and the moon, even if it's just within the Renaissance field, to be covered by the student in their PhD work. Based on this criterion of the 3 to 4 years of diligent study, we recognize in the first year during transfer of status how many authors and texts you study for your PhD so that you can finish it within 3 or 4 years of study. And so it's based on all of these factors that my previous assessors had approved the scope of my project. So it is fundamentally unfair that they would just fail me in the advanced level confirmation of status assessment by reasoning that my PhD thesis does not have sufficient scope for Shakespeare studies. And it's even more problematic that when they refer to the scope, they're referring to the scope of Shakespeare himself. The other facet is that it's not factually true that I'm doing a sole focus on Shakespeare as they've accused me in the report, because in my chapter, half of the chapter is exclusively studying the classical author Seneca and his treatise on benefits, and the remaining half of the chapter studies Shakespeare's King Lear using the Senecan framework. In spite of this, the assessors never mentioned the name Seneca even once during the assessment or in the report, and then are bizarrely accusing me of sole focus on Shakespeare when, as you can clearly see, that's not even factually accurate. My college raised concerns about the omission of Seneca in their supporting letter, and if you see the experts' supporting statements, they have said that my contributions to my field of study through the Senecan framework is quite original and genuinely new. So there are a lot of things that are problematic here, and the decision of assessors has nothing to do with academic judgment. I think it has more to do with academic bullying rather than academic judgment.
So, from what you have just shared, it is quite evident that there is a toxic academic culture. Or do you think it's like you were discriminated because of your ethnicity? Do you think so?
I definitely think so, because let me give you some statistics regarding Shakespeare studies in the English faculty. 2 white students in my own PhD cohort got their PhD degrees on Shakespeare, and one of them even had the same assessor as me. And after I was failed, one of the assessor's own PhD student, who did her PhD on a single Shakespearean play, she also got her PhD degree, whereas I was the only student of color to attempt to pursue PhD on Shakespeare in recent years, and they have targeted me and have failed me by strangely reasoning that Shakespeare does not have scope. So certainly, I think racial discrimination has played a huge factor in the decision of the assessors.
And did you also pursue this legally?
Well, after the OIA did not uphold my complaint, I did submit a judicial review about the PhD issue in the High Court in London on 9 February 2024. And the matter is currently in the court, and I'm hoping to get a hearing.
So, Lakshmi, you just mentioned about the plagiarism issue by one of the assessors. Could you please tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. So evidence has emerged for one of the assessors engaging in academic misconduct and plagiarism of my work after she failed me, which then raises questions about the academic integrity of the November 2021 confirmation of status decision. The assessment guidelines say that we have to submit a 10,000 word sample chapter. And as I mentioned earlier, the sample chapter I submitted studied Shakespeare's King Lear using the classical author Seneca's treatise on benefits. And as I mentioned before, half the chapter exclusively studied Seneca's on benefits, and the remaining half of the chapter studied Shakespeare's King Lear using Seneca's treatise on benefits. And in spite of it, the assessors did not mention the name Seneca even once during the assessment or in the report. Then the question that we need to ask, what does it tell us about the assessment standards of a premier institution such as Oxford when they don't even mention the central theme of your work? Now, the other question that I would ask is, would they have conducted the assessment in this manner if it had been a white student? And as I mentioned, my college did raise concerns about the assessment process. Now, An interesting development is that by deliberately omitting Seneca from the assessment process, and after omitting Seneca from the assessment process, one of the assessors organized a seminar on Seneca just about 2 months after she failed me. And I think that she's trying to fashion herself as an expert on Seneca. And if you know her intellectual preferences, you know that Seneca is like her pet theme. And it seems that she wants to be the first person to explore these significant themes, and she wants to remove a student of color's contributions and appropriate these important and significant contributions herself, and she has been laying the groundwork for that. And furthermore, a few months later, the university organized a fancy book exhibition and a book publication which had a chapter on Seneca and on benefits.
Okay.
And a few months after that, the assessor herself published a book which had explored Senecan themes when studying King Lear. So all of these events, the seminar, the book exhibition, the publication, and the assessor's own publication, they all show that the Senecan theme is quite important. Now, why did they mention it when a student of color explored these themes for the first time? And if you look at the testimonies from experts that I've received from around the world, you could see that they have highlighted the important contributions I'm making to Seneca, and they have said that it's genuinely new and original. By omitting the Senecan theme from the confirmation assessment and then organizing prestigious events and book publications on similar themes, it seems to me that the English faculty is trying to erase the original contributions made by a woman of color. And this is problematic because I was prevented from achieving academic career progression through a doctoral degree and publication based on similar themes. As per the university's definition of academic misconduct, I quote here, misconduct in research can include acts of omission as well as acts of commission. Since my stage 1 appeal in December 2021, I've consistently objected to the omission of Seneca from the assessment. And so the assessor's omission of Senecan material from the assessment in light of these developments qualifies to be treated as an act of academic misconduct through omission. And furthermore, the very same assessor also plagiarized the central premise of my PhD thesis in a workshop she organized in May 2023. And as a woman of color, what I found most offensive about this painful episode is that she introduced the theme of race to explore my PhD topic. I believe that she is introducing the theme of race in order to give the false impression to the world that she is a progressive intellectual who is committed to the cause of racial justice, a topic that I would say is somewhat fashionable in academia these days. However, what I think she's really doing is to use the discourse of race to camouflage the fact that she's plagiarizing a student of color's ideas after unconscionably failing her based on the preposterously concocted excuse of Shakespeare supposedly not having spoke for PhD study. And so these are worrying developments, and it shows that not only are students exploited on a financial level, but even our intellectual properties are being appropriated and exploited.
So Lakshmi, your college letter raised concerns over supervisions. What kind of problems you faced during the supervisions?
I have faced significant problems with supervision in that my original offer letter gave me the supervisor of my choice who was an expert on Shakespeare. The offer letter said if there are going to be any changes to supervision, we'll keep you fully informed. However, they breached the contract of that offer letter by changing the supervisor without informing me and giving me someone who does not have even a single publication on Shakespeare and who was new to Oxford and did not have experience of supervising students at Oxford. And they have violated several university guidelines in appointing a supervisor who was new to Oxford. And Furthermore, he was very negligent in terms of submitting the mandatory supervision reports. As per the guidelines, he should submit 4 supervision reports per year, but he usually submits just 1 for the whole year, and he was extremely negligent. And as I was struggling with supervision, and I had my confirmation exam due very soon, well before the first confirmation attempt, I actually approached my supervisor and I said, look, I need more time and support. And I said that my thesis has a broad scope, and so I'd like to have a second supervisor on board. And I proposed the name of the original supervisor who was supposed to supervise me. She did confirm her availability, and she was available for supervision. But my supervisor prevented me from having a second supervisor because he said that's not possible at this stage. The guidelines do not have any restrictions on when we have to change the supervisor. And so that's a very problematic response, especially given that he has been himself negligent. And he has also admitted that this is a Shakespeare-centric project, and in many ways that he's not the most suited person to supervise this. In spite of that, he has prevented me from having a second supervisor. It's very unfortunate, and it has had very negative consequences. It has had.
Lakshmi, did you raise the issues you were facing during your supervision with the university?
Yes, the email that I sent to my supervisor was before my first confirmation attempt. So I did raise the issue with the faculty. And because my supervisor said that it will not be possible to change supervision at this relatively late stage in a very categorical manner, I was unable to, escalate that further. And then during the appeals process, my college raised concerns about supervision. While they asked me to file a separate there have been a lot of procedural irregularities in the way they arbitrarily handle the appeals and complaint system, and I'll not go into the details. But I did raise the concerns about supervision with the faculty as well. They asked me to go to the OIA, but the OIA is telling me, because you have not completed the internal procedures for supervision, we will not consider the supervision issues. So it's as if they are tossing me around like a football through these appeals and complaint system without trying to actually finding a way to address the actual problems that are in front of us. And so it's this bureaucratic maze into which you are forced to go through with no end in sight.
Lakshmi, what will be your concluding remark, and what do you expect next to happen now?
The reason why I'm speaking out publicly now is because I pursue the appeals and complaints processes for nearly 3 years, and I have not received justice in spite of manifest evidence of procedural irregularities and biases. And I think that the reason why they have these appeals and complaints procedures is to give you a more affordable alternative to the legal procedures, which are far more expensive. But I've found personally that these appeals and complaints procedures themselves have been quite expensive, because it's been nearly 3 years, and I've been in the UK, and I was forcibly transferred into the MLIT course, and they've been forcing me to submit it while the appeals and complaints procedures were ongoing. And as a result of all of this, a lot of living expenses costs have had to be met, which is very expensive. Yeah. And so this is a real concern. Going forward, what I really would like is for the university to listen to the students' appeals and complaints in a fair manner, because at the moment their attitude is, we don't want to listen to you. We just want to get rid of you. That's the kind of attitude that they have taken. It's like they want to delay, deny, and deflect giving you justice instead of finding mutually agreeable solutions for everyone. I think that we still have the possibility of resolving this matter out of the court. I have been attempting to request the university to come forward to engage in alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So far, they have not accepted that, and I hope that they do listen to me and come forward to resolve this matter out of court, because all the academic record shows that I have produced a good piece of work, and the fact that one of my assessors is engaging in academic misconduct and plagiarism of my work in a very strange way itself shows the good quality of my work. And so it's only fair and reasonable that the university comes forward to resolve my PhD information issue in an amicable manner. And so I'm not even requesting for the PhD degree at this stage. I'm only asking for the opportunity to submit my PhD thesis and have my external viva.
Yeah.
And so that's a very reasonable request, and I hope that the university listens to me and resolve this in an amicable manner.
We hope the same. Thank you so much for sharing your story and wish you all the best from our side.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me. Thank you.